The crisis between Israel and the United States is a very deep one, not because it touches the foundations of the relations between the two countries, certainly not between the two peoples. I'm not afraid something fundamental is changing there. But what you have is an American administration that believes that it can mobilize pressure on Israel to the end of convincing Arabs to accept American positions when it comes to the really important issues of Iran. And unfortunately, we have seen that practically everything the Obama administration did was counterproductive. It's counterproductive, A, because it raises expectations in the Arab world to a level that Israel cannot satisfy, the United States cannot satisfy, and therefore, inevitably, it will lead to frustration because the Americans are basically now promising the Arabs that they will make Israel's life miserable as long as Israel doesn't accept the Arab dictates on a number of issues. This is extremely counterproductive when it comes to the Arab side of the equation. But it is also extremely counterproductive when it comes to the Israeli side. The Israeli public realizes that the Obama administration is unfriendly to Israel. To begin with, Obama did not start on the right foot with Israeli public opinion. Not only did he make no effort whatsoever to calm the Israeli apprehensions, to try to assure Israel that the United States is continuing to stand with it, but now Obama initiated this crisis and he used the excuse of the mistake Israel made, and now what he's trying to do is to bring Israel to its knees when it comes to Jerusalem. Israelis are known to have made concessions, if we are speaking about major concessions over a long period of time, sustainable concessions, when they were sure that they can deal with the security problems that are involved and also with the political threats that are involved. Now, you can pressure Israel in a very limited way to make major concessions on a very limited field, on a very limited subject, for a short period of time. But if you look at all the major settlements that we've reached here, look at the agreement with Egypt, look at the later on the willingness of Israel to commit itself to withdraw from the overwhelming majority of the West Bank, look at the disengagement in Gaza, look at the willingness of Israel to partition Jerusalem. All of these were achieved when the Israelis and the Americans were coordinated, where Israel was sure that it had an American backing. Now this is being questioned. I don't think that what we are going to see here is a settlement. A, because you can't negotiate a settlement the way the Palestinians want to negotiate it. They basically want to use the Americans in order to coerce Israel. B, because the Palestinians don't want a settlement. They don't want a state. What they want is to continue the situation where they're getting billions of dollars. Everybody loves them. Everybody pities them. Everybody makes Israel's life miserable. And the Palestinians have no responsibility whatsoever. They don't even start to build a nation. You have Salam Fayyad, who would have wanted to do so, but had he wanted to do so, he could have had, and his people could have had, the greatest possible opportunity with the Olmert suggestions. Olmert went beyond what anybody ever offered to the Palestinians, to the point where I'm not sure he could have had the support of Israeli public opinion, but they didn't seize it, they did not try it, they don't want to reach a settlement, even if they get almost 100% of what they demanded. This is something you don't usually get in negotiations. Olmert offered them, to a very large extent, 100% of what they wanted. Of course, they also want, but they don't say so, their right of return, namely the destruction of Israel demographically. But if they would have wanted to build a nation, this is what they could have had. What we see now is the Palestinians saying to themselves, why should we take risks? Why should we give up anything, including our claim to Tel Aviv and Haifa, if we can simply use violence and everybody will love the consequences of our violence when Israel needs to defend its citizens, and B, why should we make concessions? Why should we reach a historic compromise when we have the Americans pressuring Israel unilaterally to do what we want them to do? So violence pays, and therefore the Palestinians will try. Will they succeed? I hope not, but it really depends on two things. The first is Israel taking a very tough stand concerning the riots that we've seen now, not only on the spot, not only in Jerusalem itself, but also preventing the Muslim movement, which is basically the Israeli equivalent of the Hamas, joining the people in Jerusalem and trying to produce major violence in Jerusalem. So if Israel does not let it happen by a massive police force that will be there to prevent a major outbreak of hostilities, the more police you have, the more military forces you have, if need be, outside of Jerusalem, the more you can keep it down without using Israeli violence, because it's only when very few policemen are facing huge crowds that they must resort to violence, because they have no other course of action that is open to defend their lives. If you have a massive police presence, if you have a massive border patrol presence, then you can prevent these riots from going beyond a certain point, from escalating to a point that will endanger both Israelis and Arabs. So what we have here is a need to contain the violence and at the same time to be flexible politically. I don't mean to be flexible in the sense of accepting American dictates now of stopping to build in Jerusalem. This is something that no Israeli government can do or should do. What I'm saying is, alongside the insistence that Israel will not do it, it can still offer areas of flexibility that Israelis already discussed with Palestinians in the past, that Israeli officials, including an Israeli prime minister, two Israeli prime ministers, already offered the Palestinians in the past. So you can have this combination of a very tough position when it comes to the riots and a flexible position when it comes to the possibility of a settlement.